Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Morning Cup of Hockey presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code Daily365. I hope every Canadian listener that we have had a great Thanksgiving yesterday. That's Colby Cohen. I'm Jonny Lazarus. A lot to get into today. There were a ton of games yesterday starting at 1 p.m. throughout the entire day. If anyone watched that Ottawa Senators LA Kings game, you were certainly entertained, even though I think it was blacked out for some people over here. I don't even know if Colby was able to watch it. So tough one over there, but a lot to get into today. Colby, before we get into anything, how you feeling this morning?
You know what? I know you're referring to me. It was weird when I tried to look at my ESPN Plus to put that game on as I was kind of going back and forth trying to watch the other 1 p.m. games. It said that it was blacked out due to my location, which really didn't make sense, seeing as how I'm not
Ottawa and LA.
not in either of those locations. So I wasn't able to watch that game, and it seemed like a pretty exciting game. But I did watch almost the entire Bruins game. I'm pretty dialed in on that little rivalry that's been brewing over the last couple of years. Those games get ugly pretty quick.
Well, our friends, the Empty Netters, actually tweeted out like complimenting Florida, and they're actually Boston Bruins fans, and they were just getting shit on by people like, saying, "Aren't you guys Bruins fans? Why do you keep glazing Florida?" But Florida really just owns Boston right now. For the past 2 years, they have. And the Panthers, without Tkachuk, without Barkov, go into Boston and beat the Bruins with Swayman in net too. Reinhart, another shorthanded goal.
Reinhart's goal off the face-off.
Mm-hmm.
He's a lethal shooter, man.
Yeah, that was a nice
shot. My God, he's a lethal shooter. But that game was like out of hand within the first 5 minutes of the game.
It seems to always be with them, though.
It was that game.
Marchand jumped somebody too, right?
Pasta ran in. Who did Pasta run into? It was kind of like an inadvertent contact, but it had definitely an interference feel to it. Mm-hmm. And then who was it? I don't remember who it was. Know. And then Marshy jumped right in and dropped his gloves. And it was, those 1 p.m. games at the Boston Garden or the TD Garden, those games are always a little out of hand. There's usually a lot of piss and vinegar flying around for those 1 p.m. games in Boston.
I love a matinee, honestly. I wish there was maybe one afternoon game a day is obviously a stretch, but I wish we had more afternoon hockey on a weekday. Obviously, yesterday is a holiday, so it's different.
Baseball does it. They have no regard for kids being in school. They have games during the day all year. Well, I shouldn't say that all year. A lot of their season is in the summer, but they do have day games in September and October.
Yeah, I would love it. I mean, there's nothing better than a hockey game.
It was Nate Schmidt. Chef Richard is letting us know. That's exactly right, too, because I remember having a moment when that was going on where I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot Nate Schmidt is a Florida Panther now. That just doesn't seem right to me. But, I will say this, and I know we have a packed show today and we have a lot of things. We want to get to this Buffalo thing, but I just want to say this, I don't like the way the Bruins decor is playing. I really don't. I think that they look slow. And, Mason Lohrei scored a great individualistic goal after getting caught on a bad change and giving one up, maybe 2 shifts, 3 shifts before. So I give Jay Leach credit for getting Lohrei right back out on the ice, which I think is important for a young player. And
Did you just make up a word?
What'd you say?
A great individualistic goal?
I made it up. It's a word now. I think individualistic is a word.
I don't know.
I'm sure someone in the chat can tell me I'm wrong.
Let us know.
But he makes that little inside-outside move with the puck.
Yeah.
I mean, he's confident, Lohrei. I mean, he's already been healthy scratched once this year, so it hasn't been totally smooth. Patra's been in and out. I don't see. I trust Catherine all day, every day. That's definitely a word. Olivia too. Probably the 2 most trustworthy people in our chat right there. So I'll take a +1 on that. John, you'll take it. You'll take a minus on that. I'll take a plus on that. There we go. Our guy Glenn. Oh, there we
Everyone's coming in. Yep. Everyone's coming in to back you up.
They're all coming for you, Johnny, already. So I'm concerned about the Boston Bruins defense. They got big, but do they have enough speed? I don't know. To me, they look just a step too slow.
Well, I think Charlie Boy's had a pretty decent start, but outside of him, yeah, I mean, I agree. I haven't watched a ton of Boston.
Charlie's hot and cold. Like, he is hot and cold. Catherine cancels out Tuscan.
Fair enough.
I'm calling it Tuscan from here on out. But
also, I forgot where they fit. I think they were like the 6th lowest scoring decor last year. But seeing Lorai score, seeing Brandon Carlo score yesterday.
I know, but Carlo's not going to put points.
No, for sure. But they do need the contributions. And obviously, you know, I think actually, I think Mike Bartner might have been the one to say it, but maybe people overhyped Boston's blue line last year, and it was more Swayman Ullmark that made them look good and canceled out those issues. And this year, maybe with Swayman's slower start, just because he missed a lot of training camp, we're seeing more of those flaws now. You know, Swayman hasn't had the best start really either, but like no one's going to put the blame on him right now just because he missed most.
Yeah, but I don't think he's played poorly. Like I think
but he hasn't played up to his contract yet.
They're not really doing, like, he's getting left out to dry. I mean, they're getting beat back to the net. They're giving up odd man rushes. Like, they're doing things that is kind of unlike the way that they've played the last couple of years. So, all right, look, I know, like, talking about the Bruins was not how we were going to start today's show.
Not at all.
New York Marines on your side on this. I saw Josh. Josh asked, wasn't Seamus Casey the thumbnail for today's show? He was the thumbnail for today's show, and we're going to spend a portion of this show today giving Tom Fitzgerald a crown for building one of the best blue lines in the NHL that's not getting talked about. And Seamus Casey is definitely a part of that. But when all this stuff started to go down in Buffalo and the fallout from it started, and I started watching the video, I wrote to Johnny and Vic, and I said, there's no way we don't start the show with this Buffalo situation, because honestly, I got to tell you something. That video of what happened yesterday in practice in Buffalo made me absolutely sick. And here's a look at Rasmus Dahlin, your captain, going low on Peyton Krebs, and then obviously a fight, follows it. And the fight is not what I have a problem with whatsoever. And Johnny made a great point that we should talk to Pat Maroon about this based on what happened in St. Louis on their cup run. But you do not, under any circumstances, go low on a teammate like that. Like, I heard the story. Krebs high-sticked him. Maybe Krebs was pissing him off in practice, whatever. So you know what? Go slash him in the foot and then drop your gloves. But to go low on your teammate like that, when you're the captain of your team, and then afterwards, he's talking about, Johnny, how he shouldn't have done it, and, it was a poor decision by him. Yeah, buddy, you think? I mean, what a disaster Buffalo is. Another year where, they look like they're off to a shit. Well, they are off to a shit start. And on top of it, how much runway does this general manager have? Was Lindy Ruff the right guy? I mean, I don't know, Johnny. I don't know if you're as bothered by that as I am, but if a teammate did that to me, I would be irate.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think anyone looks at that hit and says, good for you, Rasmus Dahlin, but is anyone going to sit here and say they're not happy to see the Buffalo Sabres have some spark and fire in a fucking practice? Like, they didn't get off to their best start.
Johnny, no F words, okay,
yeah,
buddy?
I know.
You can't say the F word when Bet365 is on the screen. How many times do we have to remind you of that?
Well, I was going to do our Proraso read, but you jumped in a little too early.
There is. I swear all the time. My wife said to me yesterday, she goes, you do realize you are a day or two away from our daughter saying the F word, because she's turned into a parrot, like her vocab. But when we get on this show and we see Bet365, we have one rule. Don't use the F word when Bet365. Clean it up. Would you read Proraso? Let's keep talking. This way you can swear left and right, okay? I hope your mom is not watching today. And if she is, I hope she yells at you.
So this opening segment is brought to you by our friends at Proraso, the most complete choice for shaving and beard care. Made in Italy since 1948, Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Proraso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15. And I apologize to our friends at Bet365 for my potty mouth. I'll put $1 in the swear jar when my mom picks me up for my dentist appointment later on Long Island. But yeah, it's been a tough start for me today. But back to my original thought, I guess. I like seeing that happen in practice. Like I like seeing the result of it. I don't like seeing the actual hit. And if a guy hit me like that in practice, I think I'd have the same reaction.
You
But
would you?
Yeah, I would. I've gotten into fights. Don't
I
get me
believe
wrong.
you. Oh,
Yeah,
listen, I believe you. I
yeah.
believe you.
I'm not easily bothered, but when stuff is unnecessary,
That's a cheap hit.
I get pissed. Yeah.
It's a cheap hit, and you're the captain. Come on.
But
It's unacceptable. Do we have Jordan Schmaltz's tweet, Vic? If everybody knows Jordan Schmaltz, Jay Swish on Twitter, Nick Schmaltz's brother. He's pretty funny, honestly. He does a lot of stuff with Missing Curfew. He has his own thing, Hockey Night in Scottsdale. He wrote, why did Rasmus Dahlin, the captain, open ice hip check his own teammate? That is some deep-rooted hate towards a fella or a totally boneheaded play, but it's inexcusable to me. If you have a problem with a guy, talk it out or fix it over fisticuffs. Chicken shit play as your leader, and the Sabres are a full-on dumpster fire. Completely agree. Like, yeah. I word for word completely agree, Johnny.
Him and Robbie, they do the Hockey Night in Scottsdale together, Heat Daddy. They went off on Buffalo on their show like last week. They've been shitting on Buffalo for literally like 7 straight days. Just about everything needs to change there. Kevin Adams needs to go. And how, this team right now, I think the exact quote they said was, if you miss the playoffs for 13 years in a row, you're just dumb. Like that was their legit quote. And I thought it was really funny. I was cracking up listening to that. But again, like, the concern for Buffalo, I mean, they beat Florida without Barkov, without Tkachuk, without Bobrovsky, and you could say they beat the Panthers, and some people can hang their hat on that, but they're a mess. And we said it when we had Tage on, like, they do have potential. Their blue line is going to be strong. They're still really young, but their forward group isn't really it either. And I think it all kind of stems back to buying out Jeff Skinner this summer with no plan for that money. Like, what are they doing with that? Jeff Skinner has been one of their better goal scorers over the past few seasons. Granted, he's not the Jeff Skinner he was, in his prime, but he's still an important player and was a big part of that locker room. And that's a part of their culture that is now gone.
Yeah. Well, and they have $6+ million in cap space. So you're right. It just seems like Kevin Adams has been really, really passive, and they're just not they're not making progress. And when you get off to a start like this, look, the biggest thing from Schmaltz's tweet that I will say is, like, you don't just go low on a guy like that unless there is something deeper with, Krebs and Dahlin, brewing. Because again, that's not your typical get even type of play. That's a dirty, dirty play that you could take a guy's ACL out. I just, like, it's such a childish thing to do. How are you just got named captain.
Vic, I don't know if you have that picture I just sent you teed up, but Peyton Krebs actually did post on his Instagram story yesterday a picture of the two of them. It was him and Rasmus Dahlin.
I saw that.
Hugging, and it was like hugging my best friend when we score. I mean, listen, that's him putting basically, what would the term be?
Water under the bridge.
Water under the bridge, I guess, would be the term. Just so fans can be like, okay, they made up,
Do we have the sound, Vic, ready that I sent you yesterday of the interviews that they both did after practice? Because they both talked about it after practice. I think Lindy Ruff even talked about it after practice. And, one of the reporters, I think, that we showed, she had all that sound. So I think that we're concerned that it might freeze, but the long and short of it was that both players said, look, this isn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Boys will be boys was the quote that Lindy Ruff used. Rasmus Dahlin said it was his fault. He did own up to it and say this was created by
obviously
me.
It's his fault.
But it was obviously a reaction to a high stick or whatever we maybe don't know about. But again, like, when you've gotten off to this poor start, you went to Europe, you didn't play well in Europe, your training camp is cut short, things are a little bit different. They're just not rising to the test. If I'm Sabres fans, I would just be so furious. Like, I wouldn't be showing up to games if I'm a Sabres fan, because they need to have their voices heard, and changes need to be made. And I'm not talking about Lindy Ruff. I'm talking about the general manager. I just don't think he has done nearly a good enough job. I thought the way he got the job was weird. He was in the business side of the organization in like a community, position, executive position. Then all of a sudden the next day he's the general manager. I mean, look, yeah, he was a hockey player, but like that means he was probably politicking behind the scenes in order to get the GM job. Just an ugly way to get a job, ugly way to start. And he just hasn't done a good job. I mean, another year that looks like it's going down the toilet for Buffalo. And, there's always, are we going to get Patrick Kane? Are we going to get Patrick Kane? Why would he want to come and be a part of this circus in Buffalo? I can't think of one reason, to be honest.
It's funny. I actually spoke to Patrick Kane yesterday, and I asked him a similar question about his friends back in Buffalo wanting him to go play there. And he was like, they tried all they could, but I just wasn't going. But that was funny talking to Kane yesterday about that exact thing. And just looking at Buffalo's numbers this year, they play against Pittsburgh tomorrow. Right now, Buffalo, who you would think would have a pretty decent power play with Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, Dahlin, guys that can move the puck and shoot the puck. Their power play is 0 for 14 to start the year through 4 games, which is pathetic. Not one power play goal. That's something that obviously has to be fixed. I don't really have more of a talking point there, but you look at those guys. Well, you just look at those guys and you think, how has this team not scored a power play goal? Like you just give Tage Thompson a one-timer, chances are it's going to go in more than it's not.
Look, they're going to have to get active with their forwards. Yeah. I don't like the way that their forwards are built. They don't have the size. They don't have the heaviness. I think they've got some Band-Aids on some bigger wounds than they're caring to share. Look, the back end, it has promise. In goal, I think, you've got a guy in UPL who did have a good season, but also, is he going to have another season like that, right? And Devin Levi, unproven, right? I mean, I know you picked him for Calder, to win the rookie trophy last year, and he spent the year in the minors, which is where he should have been. And to be honest, he probably should be back in the AHL this year. Goaltenders need time to season. You go back and you look at Tuukka Rask and most of these guys. I know Carey Price is the exception to that rule, but a lot of these goaltenders, they were patient with, and then they became, really, really good goaltenders at the NHL level by not being rushed into the NHL in front of a team that's a little bit of a disaster. So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you think Kevin Adams survives this season at the rate that they're going?
I don't think he'll make it to Thanksgiving at this rate.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. But speaking of goaltenders, let's move into a goaltender that is, oh boy, I mean, he's having a rough go, and that is Alexander Georgiev right now, who has, I don't know why he started last night to begin with. He's been pulled in the first 2 games last night. Not much better. Has a minus 7.7 goals saved above expected, which is dead last by far in the NHL. And what is Colorado going to do if they can't get a save? Because this team right now, they look like a total disaster of what we've seen, from what we expected to be a good team, and the Avalanche go.
No, I was just going to say the interesting thing last night, Johnny, they got off to a good start. I think they were out shooting the Islanders, 6 or 7 to 1 to start that hockey game. And the Islanders, you kind of give them credit. They kind of weathered the storm. Look at New York Marine. Tony was right. It's so funny you're saying that because I literally sent that to the group text last night.
Yeah.
It's not pretty in Colorado right now, but I'm just going to say this because I did watch 95% of that game. I didn't see the last maybe 10 minutes of the third period because I fell asleep. But, Colorado's playing careless with the puck. I mean, you look at some of the goals that they gave up. You look at 2 of Brock Nelson's goals. And while Brock Nelson, I mean, he's as good a shooter as it gets, especially right now, the confidence he's feeling. The one goal, it's a turnover. He walks through a couple of guys. I mean, how are you that open when Colorado actually has people in the defensive zone? How are you able to weave through the highest danger area on the ice and to get that good of a grade A against Georgiev? And I mean, listen, beautiful finish. Oliver Shillington is completely flat-footed. There's really nothing he can do there. But look at all the burgundy sweaters. It's not like they flew the zone. They're just puck watching and they're just not picking things up. And then on Cale Makar's turnover on Brock Nelson, I think it was Brock Nelson's other goal. There were so many last night. I'm jumbled on them, but he just turned. I mean, you never see Cale
shorthanded, right? Yeah, it was a shorthanded goal.
You never see him do that. But last night, when it rains, it pours. I mean, he put a perfect tape-to-tape pass on. I think it was Nelson's stick. Maybe it was Duclair. I don't remember. There was so many games yesterday. The goals kind of bleed together, but very uncharacteristic. And so when you've got a goaltender that isn't playing all that well, being thorough with the puck, Johnny, managing the puck at the blue lines. I mean, these become imperative things when you don't have Igor Shesterkin to bail you out like the Rangers did at times yesterday. I'm not saying they needed him to be a superstar yesterday, but he made the saves when they needed to be there. And Jeremiah, if you want to throw that quote up on the screen there, Vic, Cale Makar after the game said last night, I'm hard on myself, but at the end of the day, I got to be better for these guys. It's definitely a lot closer game if I didn't play tonight. I mean, he was a disaster last night. He gets a pass because of how good he's been, but just over the course of his career. But it wasn't pretty for your old teammate last night, Johnny.
No, and Cale is the first one to hold himself accountable. So I actually do like that quote from him saying it's definitely a lot closer game if I don't play tonight. But I mean, Colorado, again, like looking at their numbers too, their goals against is a 6.67, which is, again, by far the worst in the NHL. PK at 57.1%. Like these are just things that are a huge concern. They've given up 20 goals against through 3 games. 20. In what world does that happen in the NHL, especially with a team as good as them? But Georgiev, I feel like, has gotten a pass because he started. So, I think he had 40 wins last year, which, is looked at as great, obviously, because he played so many games. But can Colorado do anything to address goaltending? Because if this keeps up, they're not going to be a playoff team. They can't be. And someone's, I've heard people say, don't worry, McKinnon and Rantanen and Makar will get them going, and their offense will outweigh their negatives on D. But that's just not going to be the case when they're letting up 4 to 5 to 6 a night.
Well, you also have to realize, no Nichushkin, no Lehkonen, no Drouin, obviously Landeskog, no Taves last night.
Yeah.
So their blue line is a little bit depleted. Ludwig's playing, Malinsky's playing, Oliver Shillington's playing on the top pair with Makar. Probably not ideal. I think he's better suited on the third pair. But I do like Manson. I do like Girard. Look, I think as their back end gets healthy, I think that helps. And I think when you add Nichushkin, Lehkonen, and Drouin back to your lineup, I think that also helps because right now, you basically have a top line with McKinnon and Rantanen, and then you have Ross Colton, who's not a first-line player, but he's a good player, but he's not a first-line player. Casey Middlestat has not done it for me in Colorado. I still think, because I actually know that Cutter Gauthier almost got traded to Colorado. That was a deal that was put on the table, but for Byram. And then the thing was that they didn't want to do the trade 1-for-1. Okay, Colorado didn't want to do Byram for Cutter Gauthier 1-for-1. He wanted something extra, and the Flyers, just weren't willing to do that, and so the Flyers moved on to Anaheim. Could you imagine if they had Gauthier in that second center spot instead of Middlestat? I mean, even with how new Gauthier is in the NHL, I'd like that a lot more. Callum Ritchie got his first goal last night. He's a guy Frank said in the beginning of the year on Daily Faceoff could be targeted as a guy who could have a breakout year, but I mean, they've got a bad, basically, I shouldn't say a bad, right? They've got a below average bottom 9. Their top line is their top line. They've got those two guys. You could throw Keith Jones with them like they did back in the day with Lindros and Leclerc, and they're going to make him look like a star. But they got trouble up front. They just don't have the depth to score.
That's what we in our preview. That's what we said about Colorado. They're not the same team.
But I thought they'd be better. I really did. I didn't see it being this poor early on, but I also wasn't expecting no Devon Taves. Again, Calvin DeHaan to me is still a good, serviceable third pair NHL defenseman. I'm happy if he's on my third pair. I feel good about that, right? And then, Nichushkin is kind of one of the straws that stirs it all up. So, problematic for Colorado right now, and look, you've got the Islanders who kind of had that, early bend but no break. And then they capitalized. They were opportunistic. And Sorokin.
I wanted to compliment Sorokin. It was his first start of the year.
Yeah, talk about him.
No, Ilya Sorokin was something that was going to be a question mark right now with his back surgery over the summer. And listen, we all know that Patrick Waugh loves Semyon Varlamov. Like, they were together in Colorado, and I thought this game too. I actually could not believe that they started Sorokin in this game, because I thought the Waugh with Varlamov returning to Colorado for the first time, after being fired as a coach there 8 years ago, was a storyline. And Varlamov is really Waugh's guy. Like, he does love Varlamov. And it's funny. I was talking to some people yesterday at the Rangers morning skate, and we were saying that Waugh might want to find a reason to make Varlamov the starter. And throwing Sorokin into a game like this in his first game could have been a way to not obviously sabotage the team, but it's just another reason to lean on Varlamov more. Because I think throwing Sorokin into a fire like Colorado would have been a really tough task, but he was up for it. And credit to Sorokin. He played a great game, made a couple of big stops. There was one in the first period. I think he had one on, who was it? Might have been Middlestad, a backhand glove save he made, which was really nice. But, another guy that I thought stepped up, and Eric Wilson, who's a friend of mine in the chat, is talking about it, is Alexander Romanov. Tried to throw a big hit on McKinnon, didn't really land it, goes flatlining into the boards, but that makes a really good assist. Anthony Duclair in the third period for a big goal, if you caught that.
Just too heavy, boy. I mean, Romanov is a heavy guy, and Nate was full speed. I mean, that was like two trains basically running into each other there, and McKinnon got the best of them, but then Romanov had the last laugh later in the game.
Yeah, Romanov got flatlined. But yeah, credit to the Islanders. It's a big win for them after, a pretty disappointing first two games. They, blow 1-goal leads twice in the third period, which was the same issue they had last year in their home opener. And then they go into Dallas and aren't able to find the back of the net and get shut out 3-0. So that's a big win on the road for the New York Islanders. Any other thing with this game or with Colorado that you want to get into before we, lead into the next topic here?
Yeah, you know what? There is one thing I actually want to talk about a little bit. If you do subscribe to the Daily Faceoff YouTube, we've talked about Leafs Morning Take. I know that's on Leafs Nation, which is one of our other properties that we have at Nation Network. They're going to have Joel Quenneville on Leafs Morning Take today. So that's a live show. Vic, just remind me exactly what time Leafs Morning Take starts at. I believe it's an 11 a.m. show on Leafs Nation, 11 a.m. ET. So their show is live every day. I'm pretty sure they filmed an episode with Joel Quenneville yesterday. And from what I understand, he had some really interesting things to say. I saw a couple of teasers. I saw a couple of tweets from Alberga and even a snip from those guys over at Leafs Morning Take. So Vic is also the producer for that show. So I know you guys all like to give Vic a hard time, but, get over there at 11 a.m. Check out Leafs Morning Take today on Leafs Nation, part of the Nation Network. So, yes, they don't go under the Daily Faceoff badge, but we're all one company. We're all one network and property. And Joel Quenneville, not afraid to kind of let it fly from what I understand, especially now that he's been cleared, now that Stan Bowman is back as a general manager in the NHL. So definitely check that out at 11 a.m. Leafs Morning Take. And then you can roll that right into Daily Faceoff Live with Tyler and Frank Seravalli at noon. So stuff going on all day on the network. If you haven't liked this episode yet, we're 30 minutes in. Give us a like on this episode. And if you're not subscribed to the Daily Faceoff YouTube, I cannot stress enough how much we need you to subscribe to our YouTube page. Stuff going on all day, adding new shows. I did hear a rumor that we'll be adding even more new shows here over the next little bit of time with some big announcements coming, new people, potentially shows, joining, all of the above. So always growing, always adding more. Check out Leafs Morning Take at 11 a.m. Sorry, Johnny, had to make sure we got all those plugs in around the network.
No, good stuff. I was looking at MYR Marine's comment. Fun question. Does Johnny know what flatline means? It makes sense, but I think he might not. Flatlining is when your heart rate monitor goes flat, right? That's what I'm thinking of, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's when you have no pulse. You'd say we look like we're flatlining team, or the team looks flatline. Like there's no pulse. I probably
used flatlining in the wrong term with Romanov, but you know what I was trying to say. He went.
I think you meant flattened.
Flattened, maybe would be the term. I've had a long day yesterday. I'm exhausted this morning at my Marine. I'm trying to.
You had a big photo shoot yesterday with Out West, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to power through. Shout out to the guys at Out West. They came to New York City yesterday, and we did like a rollerblading video content shoot for like 3 hours. And that was after the Rangers and Red Wings morning skate. Then I went back to the Garden for the game, and I didn't get home till like 11:30 last night. And I had to watch the end of the Islander Avalanche game. So it was a long one for me, but no excuses. We're trying to get through it. But I always appreciate the call outs. You guys know I hold myself accountable on here, even though I try to be silly and goofy with it. But Colby,
right,
let me ask you.
Let's go Devils here before we get.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question before Devils. Quick.
Go ahead.
Which team are you more concerned about, Edmonton or Colorado right now?
Probably Colorado. Colby doesn't rollerblade. Not that often, Glenn, but I do have rollerblades. I take the dog rollerblading sometimes. But I think I'm more concerned about Colorado. I really am. To me, they just don't feel like a team that recovery is in striking distance. I don't like their goaltending situation. I have a lot more faith in Stuart Skinner than I do in Georgiev, which is interesting coming from my mouth. Although I have said, like, I've come around on Stuart Skinner, even though I don't like his new pads. And I told Tyler Yaremchuk that during the game the other night when I was texting him that they should fire everybody as they were losing the other night to Calgary. I think Edmonton's going to be okay because I do think, for them, you might just have a little remnants of making it to the Cup. I mean, we see this in sports. The team that loses in the finals can sometimes get off to a sluggish start, not have a great year, but I think Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, like they will them back into contention. Yeah. Jeff Skinner kind of finds his place in where he fits into this whole thing. And some of the other players they brought in. And look, I wouldn't be shocked if they go out and try to add a defenseman here over the next couple of weeks, a veteran type of guy. So they also started slow last year. Mr. Angry Tom pointed out, and everybody has been pointing out. We put that clip on social media yesterday. All these people were like jumping down my throat. And I'm like, whoa. I didn't say I didn't think they would be okay. I just said so far they look atrocious, which is completely fair. Fair.
Mm-hmm. All right, now let's go to the Devils because we didn't give Seamus Casey any flowers yesterday, and he deserved it. When we talked about the rookies that have stood out so far, Seamus Casey, 3 goals in his first 5 games in the NHL. And last week, Colby, we said when Luke Hughes and Brett Pesce are healthy, is he the guy that comes out? And now looking at it, he's quarterbacking power play too, and he's a threat on that man advantage as well. The kid can score, at a pretty high rate. He's got a ton of skill. Maybe physicality and defense still needs to improve, but how are you taking Seamus Casey out of the lineup if they're fully healthy right now? And I know you want to credit Fitz and the blue line that he's built.
Yeah, I mean, look, this kid has ice in his veins with the puck, and you go back to the way we talked about him last year before the Frozen Four. We have been on this guy, Johnny, since last year saying, I said last year, I don't think he should sign in New Jersey because I think they have way too much of a logjam defensively. And then they went out and they, he did sign there, but as we're going to bring Frank Seravalli on and talk with him a little bit, let's let him be a part of this conversation because I know he's always on top of the news coming in and out around the Devils. I want to bring Frank in and just let him listen to this a little bit. And good morning, Frank. You got to really give Tom Fitzgerald a lot of credit for the way he's built this 8-man back end. And a lot of times GMs, they inherit players and they make them their own with long contracts. But let's just look at the 8 defensemen. Luke Hughes, 4th overall draft pick. Nemec, 2nd overall draft pick. Now, listen, it never hurts to draft 2nd overall and 4th overall, but you still got to hit. Seamus Casey, 2nd round pick, 46th overall. Okay. Kovacevic, who's played really well to start the year. Okay. He was traded for a 4th round pick from Montreal. Brett Pesce, he went out and signed as a UFA. Dahlin, he went out and signed as a UFA. Siegenthaler, he trades him. He gets him for a 3rd round pick in a cap dump and a roster spot dump from Washington. And then Dougie Hamilton, he targets as a UFA, gets him in, gives him a big, long extension. So the entire defensive core is Tom Fitzgerald's doing. There's no inherited defenseman on this group. I thought he inherited Dougie Hamilton. When I looked into it, he didn't. You got to give the guy a round of applause because this defensive group, like, you have too many good players. What a beautiful problem to have, right, Frank?
Look, I'm all for the credit, and certainly there's a ton of credit due. But what I see with this Devils team this year and the start that they're off to, there's a reason why I was thinking a couple weeks ago when we did our season preview that this team's going to win the division. And that is because of the back end. But how they got here is actually in a reverse order. This is really Tom Fitzgerald correcting a big mistake from last season, which was drafting and developing is great, but you can't feed Luke Hughes and Simone Nemitz and your young guys right to the wolves. They're going to be playing top 4 minutes soon enough. They didn't have nearly enough support last year. And then on top of it, Dougie Hamilton went down with his injury. So last year, that's the reason that team faltered and didn't make the playoffs. The coaching, that was certainly part of it as well. They were stale. There was a lot of things. It took them way too long to make that and sort of get to that point. And then same thing with the goaltending. Look, this is the first time the Devils' goaltending has been right in his 6-year tenure as manager. So certainly a lot of credit due, but also like you have to remember the Devils finished with fewer points last year than the Flyers, than the Penguins, then they weren't even like as that Eastern Conference playoff race got as jumbled as it did at the end with all those teams in the mix on the final 24 to 48 hours. The Devils weren't even in the conversation. And that was coming off of a year in which they won a round in the playoffs. So the credit is great. And I love where the Devils are at and I love where they're going. It's just that there have been a couple missteps along the way that I think are fair and important to point out that, hey, sometimes it is trial and error. Sometimes it is finding the right mix. They're on the right path now, but to kind of gloss over all that, to just get to you reading how they acquired these players, I don't think tells the whole story.
Also, again, Vic and I were kind of talking about it this morning, and Vic obviously wants to point this out because he's a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. The only team that the Devils have lost to is Toronto, and they haven't necessarily played a team that has high expectations this year so far. Like Utah is a team they beat yesterday. They beat Washington, who's going to be, the lower half of the Met, and they beat Buffalo twice in Prague. Like we haven't seen what?
I don't know. I think first off, you're sleeping on the Caps.
And I agree with that. And we argued about that.
I'm low on the Caps.
I think you're denigrating some of the Devils' opponents.
I'm also quoting Vic here. I'm quoting Vic.
But you're also just an inherent Ranger fan. So, of course you hate the Devils.
No, I actually don't. I've said so many times that Jack Hughes is my favorite player in the NHL. And Jack is actually off to a pretty slow start. Which
he hasn't scored a goal, has he?
No. He's got 3 assists in 5 games. But that's something I want to add, too, about Fitz this summer. He signed Stefan Nason, who was previously a Devil, I think like 5 or 6 years ago. And then Paul Cotter comes over from the trade with Alexander Holtz from Vegas.
And that part
we were leading the team in scoring.
Yeah, and look, I think every team could use a Paul Cotter. I love what he brings.
He's a hilarious kid too.
I'm really curious to see how Holtz works in Vegas because it kind of felt like, and look, the Devils would know him better than anyone. It kind of felt to me like they gave up on him pretty quickly for where they drafted him.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Bruce Cassidy, sink or swim. Like he's either going to get the best out of you or you're going to buckle to his personality. And I think that's one of those where it's almost like a go big or go home move in Vegas. Like it could either be, wow, how did you do that? Or he could be in the American League within 18 months. Like honestly, knowing the way Bruce Cassidy operates, knowing the way the mercenaries out in Vegas are operating, that could go big or go home.
So to compare though, Johnny, so you're a Ranger fan and the slow build that it's taken to get to some of these guys that the Rangers have selected at the top end of the first round, how long it's taken them to really scratch the surface and show what they have, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you put yourself in the shoes of a Devils fan, you take Holtz 7th overall. He's still on his entry-level contract. He has 16 goals last year in 82 games. Mm-hmm. And then after his first full NHL season, you decide to move on. What would your reaction to that be?
Well, it depends what they're bringing back. And listen, Alexander Holtz didn't really have a spot in that top 6. And Frank, if you remember, I was the one last year saying trade Kako. Like, I was all for it. I think sometimes you have to realize how your team is built and where these guys can fit, and Holtz didn't fit into that top 6. And every time Lindy Ruff gave him a chance, it seems like he gave up on him really, really quick as well. Like, he was playing 4th line minutes for most of the year last year. He got some power play time, which I think is where he scored most of those goals. But the Devils are in win now mode, and you can't sacrifice that to develop a younger player. I think that's, something that the Rangers were criticized for in years prior, was that Lafreniere and Kakko weren't getting top 6 minutes and we needed to develop them, but the team is doing so well and winning games. Like, why would you put them above a guy like Kreider or Panarin because you want them to develop if your team is winning hockey games? Like, that's really all that matters at the end of the day, right? Is if your team wins games. But last year the Devils weren't winning games. So
it's going to be an interesting test case. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think Holtz will do well in Vegas. How's he doing so far this year? I don't know if has he scored a goal this year?
He has not. He doesn't have a point in 3 games.
Okay, so not that good.
Well, and look, like I said, Bruce Cassidy, difficult guy to play for. Holtz is going to have to make some changes into the way he manages the puck, the way he tracks the puck back. Basically the way he plays without the puck is going to be on the forefront there in Vegas. And I responded to some comments from New York Marine in the chat that Holtz is, never allowed to just let it rip in New Jersey. Like, you have to earn the right to just let it rip, right? Nobody just gives you the keys to let it rip in the NHL. I mean, you've got to win. You've got to prove it. You've got to have enough equity built up with your coach, or you got to make enough money that, you've got more power than him, whatever the case may be. So I don't think Holtz is going to Vegas to just let it rip. He's going to have to fall in line with everybody else there in Vegas to kind of figure it out. But I know we've kind of strayed away from the Devils, and you're right, Frank. They had a mess on their hands last year, and they're weeks away from getting a couple of these injured defensemen back with Pesci and with Hughes. And I know these GMs don't make decisions until they have to, because you just never know what could happen between now and then. But, let's say all things considered, Frank, you've got 8 defensemen that are NHL caliber defensemen. For you, like, who's coming out of your lineup? Like, how are you managing that? And I guess it's something that they're hoping that they don't have to make those decisions.
Well, they're going to have to. At some point you're going to be healthy, knock on wood. And I think in a perfect world, had everyone been healthy to start, Seamus Casey would be in the AHL.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And I think that's still the prudent move, even if he's proven in looks that he can, because no one's questioning his talent or skill. But there's so many other facets to being a full-time NHL player. The schedule, the demands, the workload. Like, in some ways, even playing in the AHL is even more difficult with 3 and 3s. Like, it definitely is not easy. And I think it's a really difficult league to grow in.
Not a development league. The National League is not a development league. The American League is a development league, and he still needs developing.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm just saying, as much as it is a development league, tell me why playing 3 and 3 helps develop players. I don't think it does.
We've spent countless time on this show. It's basically, in my opinion, I think the American League
needs a complete overhaul, in my view.
It's fraudulent. I think it's completely fraudulent, because you're right. 3 and 3s, shitty food after games. The schedule having games condensed to the weekends for ticket sales, all that kind of stuff.
It shouldn't be run as a business. It should be run as a pure, hey, we're taking losses on this because it's a developmental league. And it's not. It's run like, hey, this is this little market's pro sports team, and we're going to play games around that. Like, I don't really care if there's 5,000 fans or 500 fans. Like, that's mostly, or should be, irrelevant to what actually matters, which is producing better players. And you can't tell me that the way that league is structured right now, that's truly what is actually in mind.
And isn't there an underager rule, or is that not an AHL rule? That's just like,
there's no underage rule in the American League.
I thought if you are like under the age of 19, you can't play in the AHL or something. Isn't that
not if you come right from you could go from the USHL at 18 years old. You could be a college freshman at 18 years old and leave after a semester and go to the AHL. That's only if you're a CHL
where you're
player.
Drafted
yeah,
from.
It's only that's only if you're a CHL player.
Got it.
Frank, let me stay in the Metro with you for a minute and switch away from the New Jersey Devils, because I'm just curious. Have you heard anything else on this Igor Shesterkin situation? And then let me ask you a 1B here. Do you believe Shesterkin's camp that we have no interest in negotiating during the regular season?
No, and I don't think the Rangers have gotten any sense that this is a hard deadline. I think they're still talking. I think they're still in communication. I think it's been really cordial. And this is why you have an agent. It's great to like place an artificial deadline on it and say, we're not negotiating after this date, because deadlines, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, deadlines produce results. And a lot of times, not saying the Rangers, but a lot of times, a lot of GMs and teams need a kick in the pants to actually get something done. That said, the season start has come and gone. Shesterkin has been more or less outrageous for the most part. And
so good.
And when you look at that, you're like, man, that really makes me hungry to get a deal done. So I also don't think, in saying all that, from a Rangers perspective, what's really the rush? Like, it just a pure, hey, we'd like to know what our cap picture looks like. That's part of it. But how much more is it going to cost you? Like, let's say he plays the same exact way the rest of the season. You're already setting the market with the new highest paid goalie deal of all time. You've already offered that. How much more is it possibly going to ratchet up? So in some ways, I feel like the pressure kind of shifts off here since the season started. And it's like, well, how comfortable is your client playing without his future financial security? At some point, the risk shifts from team to player. And I think that's actually the part we're getting to now.
Well, I think he'll be more comfortable after seeing quotes like Derek Lalonde's last night. Did you catch that at the end of the game?
I did. He said I could see why they turned down $88 million.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
head coach.
Well, I was just going to ask, is this something that we're going to talk? Go.
I was just going to read it for those that are audio only and make sure we're cluing everybody in. But Detroit Red Wings coach after the game last night on Igor Shesterkin, he's special. I can see why he turned down the $88 million. Good agent. I mean, I love that because he's just stirring the pot and trying to drive the price up on the Rangers. Like, let me ask you a question. Are you allowed to say that, Frank? Because you're not really supposed to talk about players on other teams. Like, I know there's like a gray area and a fine line.
No, you can. Coaches can always talk about players on other teams. It's managers who can't talk about acquiring other players. You're not supposed to talk about another team's players.
Appreciate the clarity there. Go ahead, Johnny. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say if this is going to be a conversation after every single game that he plays now, because after the game against Utah, it's like, oh, is this guy really worth $12 million? Now after last night's game, it's like, oh, I understand why he turned down $88 million. Is that how it's going to work all year? Is it going to be a conversation?
Probably. You think that's bad? Go live in Vic's world with Marner talk.
With Marner. Yeah, I mean, at what point, though, Frank, do you think, because Colby always asks me, but from an unbiased perspective, at what point do you think Ranger fans should be nervous if he's not signed? I mean, it seems like he wants to stay here and will do what he can to stay here, but
not really nervous at all. Like, again, I go back to the 8th year. For someone else to just tie what the Rangers have put on the table, it needs to be, unless they're in a no-tax state, which, again, we've rattled these goalies off before. They're pretty much all locked up. And we're going to be in the process of getting locked up. Saros is in Nashville, except Vegas. Ottinger, they haven't talked yet, but I don't think anyone thinks that he's going anywhere other than Dallas. Vasilevsky, Bobrovsky. Am I covering all the no-tax states?
Yeah. You're good.
Okay, so if that's the case, then someone else needs to offer 7 times 12.57 to tie. If someone is matching, aren't you just staying and getting more total dollars over 8 years? Or staying with the team you like and the city you like, where the attention is and you have a chance to win? Like, I don't see any, like, and that's why I think if I were the Rangers, I'd sit back and just kind of slow play this now. Like, we've put a great offer on the table. Are the Rangers probably willing to move a little bit? Sure. But are they suddenly going to go to 12 million? I don't think so. I really don't. They're drawing a hard line and going, that's not happening.
Under 12.
All right,
ask
him about your boy now, Johnny. I know you're dying to know.
Well, just before we let you go, is there any movement on Lafreniere's contract and the number you might think that will be?
Because Johnny needs to make sure that he's got an extension before he gets the tattoo.
Well, I understand. I understand your sensitivity to this subject. Then
point per game player. Point per game player.
More than this
dude,
year.
It's sick that's all every time he does something, I'm like, oh my God, Johnny thinks he's gonna score 100 points.
I'm just in your head every time.
Yes, every time. You're living rent free.
That's awesome.
Look, this is a work in progress. There's a ton of different options on the table. Here's where I keep coming back to that I don't think has really been talked about a lot. Let's say you made the joke about a point per game, but let's just say
over.
Okay. Let's park that. Let's say that at the end of this year, he finishes with the exact same that he had last year. 57 points.
Yeah.
He will be at that point. I just want to double check my math. He will be at that point nearly 400 games into his NHL career and arbitration eligible. And there's only 2 years left of RFA. By my calculation and by talking to people around the league, they view Alexis Lafreniere's arbitration case just duplicating, not taking a step forward, not progressing, at somewhere around 6.25 to 6.5 million a year. So then the next step is, still 6.25 or 6.5. That makes everyone really uncomfortable, I would think.
Yeah.
Plus, it gets close to walking him to free agency. That's just an RFA case. How can the Rangers, even though the first 2 years of that deal are going to be the most painful for them, because of all the other things they have going on, because of Shesterkin, because you're trying to keep this team as together as possible, the first 2 years of that deal are always going to be the most painful. The jump from 6.25 to, let's say, 8 is not really that big. But this is my opinion and thought process.
Yeah.
They should suck it up in those first couple years to then spend years 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 laughing, being like, this is the steal of the cap world right now.
I think I said in our show yesterday, I think 8.5 will be the number that he gets.
If that were on the table, my guess is that he'd probably sign it. I don't think the Rangers I think the Rangers, as these two sides are going back and forth, it seems like they're having a difficult time wrapping themselves around 8 years.
Well, I think they're also probably sitting here like, hey, you just had 1 year. Like, I think if he waits until the end of the season, he gives himself a much better case. If he puts up 75 points this year, then it's like,
well, then the number's way higher than that, which is why the Rangers, I think, as much as they've focused on Shesterkin, the inaction on Lafreniere might be the most painful because
it is for Johnny. We know that.
Well, let's go back to what I was just saying. Shesterkin, how much more is it really going to climb? Lafreniere could climb significantly.
Yeah.
And we know that whole fallacy or that whole idea of looking at it and saying he had 1 good year, he did it without power play one time.
Yeah, exactly.
And they've and other deals have been handed out now for guys who have played 50, 60 games in the National Hockey League at the same position. So, Frank, I love the fact that you just made Johnny uncomfortable for the rest of the day and probably the next few weeks as this gets worked on. So I appreciate that. Catch Frank today at noon, Daily Face-Off Live with Tyler Yaremchuk. They're every day for the rest of the season. Frank, we appreciate your time today. I'll check in with you a little bit later this afternoon. As always, thank you for the information. I'll just remind everybody one last time. Don't forget to check out Leafs Morning Take today at 11. We'll have Joel Quenneville with host Nick Alberga on that show. Joel Quenneville absolutely letting it fly. Johnny, I know you want to get to our bet of the night. I know you're staying in the Metro tonight for our bet of the night. No,
I'm actually going to a late game, and I'll watch my mouth here during this segment. But tonight's bet of the day is actually going to be Connor McDavid to have 4+ shots on goal. The Oilers are home taking on the Philadelphia Flyers, still looking for their first win. McDavid had 5 shots in the last game, 3 shots in the game before that. You got to think he's looking for the net. You got to think he's hungry to score his first goal. And this Edmonton team right now needs some offense. They haven't been scoring goals. So this is a, desperate effort I'm looking for out of the Oilers on home ice against a Flyers team that's been on the road here to start the year. Also hit our bet yesterday with ease. It was Devils 3-way to win regulation. Devils won 3-0. So feeling good after that one. Betting has actually been somewhat off to a good start for me this season. So feeling good about tonight's hit. And we're going to stay up late and watch Connor McDavid tonight. And it's always safe betting on Connor McDavid as opposed to betting on the team.
I love this bet because you're right. He is coming out in this hockey game with his hair on fire. Another home game. Flyers have been on a long road trip to start the year. Opportunity. He's going to want to show Matvei Michkov what the NHL is all about. Good job yesterday hitting your bet again. I love to see you making some people some money. I'm going to jump on board with you on Bet365 on that McDavid shot prop. Like, to me, that's such a no-brainer the way we know he's going to come out. If you're with us and you've enjoyed the episode, make sure you hit a like on the way out. If you're not subscribed to the Daily Faceoff YouTube page, do yourself a favor, subscribe, set an alert for our show. You can make it so every day our show comes out, you get an alert. Also, we're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. Everywhere you get podcasts, do it. If you're one of our loyal peeps, throw auto download on, right? That way, if you miss the show and you're out for a walk with your dogs, it's right there. You're on an airplane. It's right there. It's always at your fingertips. I know I'm going to go get in the car for a little bit after this and head down to practice today, and I'll have to throw it on just to see what your greatest moments were so I can text you about it throughout the day. Don't miss Leafs Morning Take today on Leafs Nation, part of the Nation Network, all part of the same company. Joel Quinville letting it rip. Johnny, anything else to add before we say goodbye to everyone today?
Just want to say that bet of the day was brought to you by Bet365. Remember to open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code Daily365. That's going to wrap it up for today. We'll have Pat Maroon live tomorrow morning after they play the Calgary Flames tonight. So Pat is traveling back home tonight after the game. He said he's going to land in Chicago at like 3 a.m., but he's going to be up with his daughter by 8 a.m. So we should be talking to him tomorrow morning. He might be a little bit tired, but
make sure get in the chat early and let us know what your questions are for Pat Maroon. So we'll be 10, 15 minutes with him. It won't be long, but he'll be with us live tomorrow. Good work setting that up again, Johnny. Way to go, bud.
All right. And with that, since Colby complimented me, we'll end the show. So there's no more chirps. Love you guys. See you tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.